Now, the Grenadiers, the Capitol Police, who fired at the crowd were up from a crow's nest outcropping during the first hour, and that included Officer Shauni Kerkhoff, the alleged pipe bomber. Based on your review of this use of force, do the circumstances support the use of force? She says yes. Do you recommend further investigation? No, of course not. Why don't you investigate me? Does anybody ever check that box? Yes. There was insufficient security to defend the Capitol, in part because many officers were diverted to go respond to the pipe bombs that allegedly Kerkhoff left the day before. And then she's up there shooting people. Lots of questions about Shauni Ray Kerkhoff, the woman seen here in these photos working for the U.S. Capitol Police on the day of January 6th up on the upper terrace, shooting projectiles into the faces of January 6'ers. And the Blaze did a story on this saying that they were firing those off basically immediately. They published this not long ago. They wrote, Capitol Police repeatedly used lethal force on protesters early on January 6th, instigating the whole thing, right? You're standing there protesting, you're getting shot in the face, you're in a giant crowd, things spiral out of control, you've got a pipe bomb, around the corner that is allegedly about to blow off that's just been found. It was total bedlam. Doesn't help when you're shooting people in the face. People get a little bit riled up. So they said that in the span of less than 10 minutes after a huge crowd of protesters filled the Capitol West Plaza beneath the inauguration stage, the Capitol Police, within 10 minutes, repeatedly used lethal force on the crowd, targeting people in the head, the neck, the face, the upper body. Actions that one use of force person called criminally negligent to do that. And we heard this testimony directly from the Proud Boys in the trial when they said that they were there watching people's cheeks get blown off. They're like, holy, we're like under attack. People are shooting us. During that brief span, at least 16 people were shot with kinetic impact projectiles, including 9 who took shots to the top of the head, face, and the base of the neck. According to Capitol Police, the rounds are designed to be shot at or below the waist and skipped off the pavement to strike the legs. It's called pain compliance. None of the rounds observable on the footage struck below the belt because it was a crowd, putting all the observable rounds in a dangerous and potentially lethal territory, shooting people in the head. The targeting of the crowd and one graphic bloody injury to a protester's face enraged the crowd. That's the guy who got his cheek blown out, and appeared to lead to a large-scale escalation of violence. They said they're shooting us, including the throwing of water bottles, flagpoles, and the use of pepper spray and the spray repellent. Now, there were a bunch of people who were on these calls. Deputy Police Chief called Eric Waldo, he claimed that a Capitol Police radio dispatch about 1:11 p.m., he said that his officers were using indirect firing. He says, hey, okay, everybody, we're using indirect firing, but the surveillance video says no, he's popping them in the mouths. Waldo also said that he gave repeated warnings to the crowd to disperse or face chemical munitions, but video shows he did not even have a bullhorn, liar, and no warnings could be heard on the ground level to anybody. They just started shooting people. He ordered Capitol Police Grenadiers to open fire on the crowd at 1:06 p.m. He said, I got a crowd fighting with officers, pushing, throwing projectiles, he broadcast. I have given warnings about chemical munitions, liar. I need the less than lethal team position above me to identify the agitators and start deploying. Launch, launch, launch. Stan Kephart, an expert witness on police use of force, reviewed the video, said crowd control weapons from an elevated position is criminally negligent and potentially a lethal act because somebody can get hit in the head with that. There's a wealth of clear and convincing evidence here, he says. These cops weren't trained, and what they did was a punishment tactic, okay? It was inflaming the crowd. It was resulting in injury that they're all responsible for. Now, the Grenadiers, the Capitol Police, who fired at the crowd were up from a crow's nest outcropping during the first hour, and that included Officer Shauni Kerkhoff, the alleged pipe bomber, who was working for the government at the time, is still working for the government, and we have questions about her conduct and who ordered her to do the things. And we're not going to be like the Democrats and dox her and try to harass her, of course, because we're not maniac criminals like they are, but they get away with it. So anytime you have any people harassing you about, why are you talking about somebody until they're charged with a crime or something? Yeah. We have questions about the operation. Nobody's making any allegations that she's criminally responsible for anything, but we do have questions about the conduct, and we're allowed to question our government. And we are. Blaze News has learned that many of them were there shooting at people in the mouths. And we saw this over from Nova Campaigns. They said, the Epoch Times reported that Officer Shauni Kerkhoff, the alleged pipe bomber, was shooting people in the face. Here's their use of force report that came over from her. Here's the date and the name, Shauni R. Kerkhoff. Capitol was the location of the incident. January 6, 2021, 12:30 hours is when the incident happened. She called it compliance techniques, and she shot a pepper ball launcher. The supervisor in charge of the scene and others were on scene. The deputy chief was Waldo, right there. Okay, the guy we just heard, order, launch, launch, launch. launch. I'm a liar. I said I'm warning you. Never did. Then we're following the bouncing ball. So he gives the order, goes over to her. Other people, Officer Sorrell, DeCamp, Cobert, Sprifke, and multiple other unknown officers are all up there. And they're all just popping off. Less lethal launch discharge. And here's page 2, where she explained what happened. She says, on January 6, 2021, at about 12:15, I was ordered by Deputy Chief Waldo Eric to deploy less than lethal munitions on an overwhelming number of rioters at the U.S. Capitol. I deployed multiple pepper ball projectiles from the pepper ball launcher to gain compliance from the rioters that were aggressively attacking officers on the police line and throughout the Capitol complex. And now we have a chicken or the egg problem, don't we? Were they shooting before things got riotous, or were things riotous before they started shooting? Maybe we'll get some answers on that, but I think we know based on the fact that they just tapped other so-called protesters, rioters on the shoulder and let them in the building. So we've got the letter, of course, that we're reading here says, pepper ball, they were aggressively attacking us. Anything else? Was the watch commander notified? Yes. Were you involved in the incident? No. Were there any injuries treated? Unknown injuries. Based on your review of this use of force, do the circumstances support the use of force? She says yes. Do you recommend further investigation? No, of course not. Yeah, why don't you investigate me? Does anybody ever check that box? Yes. Yes. Please come and see if I did anything wrong. Yes, please. Hey, employee signature, she signs it. They all sign off on it. Yeah, they all sign it after the fact. She signs it the next day, January 7th. Supervisor, yeah, great job. Way to go. Shot him in the face. And then another one on the 14th. So they all sign off on the use of force, and the blaze continues. And what we saw is that then they're saying this is a forensic match to the alleged pipe bomber, as we've covered previously. But the number of protesters struck is much higher than previously known. The fusillade of so-called less lethal crowd control weapons came in response to thousands of protesters. They streamed onto the Capitol property after a lightly defended police line was breached. Most of the early crowd ended up on the West Plaza beneath the Crow's Nest, and the massive amped up crowd caught police off guard. There was insufficient security to defend the Capitol, in part because many officers were diverted to go respond to the pipe bombs that allegedly Kerkhoff left the day before. And then she's up there shooting people. Here's more. Protester was there, led away by a medic. He got shot in the face. See that right there? Oh my goodness. Now, surveillance video captured the Lower West Terrace, the flight of a 68 caliber yellow marking round and red pepper rounds from the powerful FN 303 projectile launchers. It's a 3000 PSI compressed air device. Rounds traveled 300 feet per second. A Tippmann 98 pepper ball rifle was also used on the crowd. Most of the rounds were fired from less than 50 feet away. Targeting the head with kinetic impact projectiles is prohibited by the manufacturers. They didn't care. It's considered lethal force to shoot him in the head. The website also says, don't aim at the head. There's the device. Don't shoot people in the head. They're like, well, we have to save democracy. Doom, 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 doom. We have to stop our rigged election. Doom, doom, doom. Just taking out protesters. The primary effect of the projectile is trauma. It neutralizes the aggressor. Operators of this weapon are trained not to aim at the head, face, or anything like that. And here's the crowd. There's people on the upper terrace shooting them in the face. Then things get out of control. The bombardment of the early crowd is the latest controversy that they lied about. Minutes after the less than lethal projectiles were unleashed, MPD flowed into the West Plaza, spraying protesters with pepper spray. After protesters pushed back, then 40 munitions were fired or lobbied into the crowd after pushing protesters back and forming a police line with bicycle racks. And so, yeah, if you really want to start a riot, shoot them in the head. Easy to do that. So then it sounds like, they're shooting first. Minutes after less than lethal projectiles were launched, then they flew in. Then after pushing the protesters back, then they began lobbing dozens of incendiary grenades into the crowd and firing 40 millimeter shells containing plastic pellets, beanbags, and tear gas. Some 40 munitions were fired or lobbied, and then others at 1:18. Capitol Police Supervisor comes on the radio. We need munitions! Unload! Unload it all! Take them out! Keppert said the descriptor less lethal weapons depends on the launchers being used, and accuracy, of course, is a question. I wouldn't be comfortable, said this weapons person, shooting people in the face. Here was some other dude who got his head blown off. The Department of War expert said emotions can be inflamed when the weapons are used improperly. Yeah, amps up the crowds, causes a riot. Somebody screamed, we heard this in the Proud Boys trial, they shot him in the effing face, man! They shot him! A grenadier fired a 60 caliber thin stabilized projectile from a launcher that struck a black hat clad protester in the head. The impact blew the man's hat off. The round bounced off his head and struck another rioter. Just prior, video showed the man was in the second row, surging towards. As the police pushed back, the projectile screamed past the flag, struck him in the head. 7 seconds later, a man in a tan jacket was also struck by a projectile. He flinched, grabbed his head, and crouched down. They're all just getting shot in the head. Some 30 seconds later, another man was shot, and the list goes on and on. Typically, they aim for for the ground, but this case, they didn't really like these Trumpers. So massive article, goes into a lot more detail there, but we know the story. This woman, the alleged pipe bomber, is on the terrace engaged with a different device, looks like just more like a paintball gun rather than those bigger 60 caliber projectiles, but still shooting at people, and up there after allegedly dropping off the pipe bomb. Now, we don't know if that's true or not, of course, but it certainly is an interesting compare and contrast on that one.